right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls, and everyone else out there. This is another edition of the Sydney Saxophone Network Q&A sessions. A bit of a midweek session this week, so hopefully you've all been having a nice week so far, and it's a nice downhill run to the weekend in the next few days. This evening, we're very lucky to be joined by a very talented young man in the classical saxophone world, particularly in Sydney. Now, our guest this evening, I'll just give you a very brief rundown of his accolades and what he's done, because quite frankly, there's a lot there, and it's really hard to condense it all. But this evening, we're joined by Nicholas Russoniello. Now, Nick is a prominent classical saxophonist. For those who may not know, he's a recipient of the ABC Young Performer Award. He was only the second saxophonist to win this prestigious competition, and was also a recipient of the Fine Music Kruger Scholarship. He's performed as a soloist with the Adelaide, Canberra, Queensland, Melbourne, and Sydney Symphony Orchestras. It's probably quicker if you put what orchestras you haven't played with there, Nick. And then he's also performed as a chamber musician with a lot of orchestras as well. Again, Sydney Symphony. But he's also been performing with the likes of the Omega Ensemble, the Acacia Quartet. He also has his own projects such as Continuum Sax, Duo Histoire, and more recently the Golden Age Quartet. He's also become quite a prominent composer as well as performer, and is currently completing his doctorate at the Sydney Conservatorium, studying composer-performer, an area which we'll get into on the Q&A later on. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Nicholas Russoniello.
Hello, Nathan. Thanks for having me, mate.
No worries. Do you mind if I call you Nick? Because it'd be very strange after all
It would
this
be
time.
weird if you kept calling me Nicholas after all these years. I think it's the first time I've ever heard you call me that ever. So I think let's stick at least with Nick. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Okay, good to know. All right, so we'll just start with a bit of an icebreaker, and we do this with all the guests.
Yeah.
Why the saxophone? What was the thing that was the kick-started the whole thing for you?
That's the hardest question. It's actually pretty simple, and I know some of your other guests sort of said this as well. I just thought it was cool. So I played piano when I was really little, like, kindy, year one, and I was the terrible kid who didn't practice, and parents badgered him, and I ended up quitting. And then I just thought it was cool, and I'm not sure why I thought it was cool. I think maybe it was a hangover, because this is like the mid to early 90s. It was a hangover from the 80s, which was like the glory day of the cool saxophone. I think maybe like because I was a toddler at the back end of the 80s, the saxophone seemed cool there. Like I always tell people, like, Hoots on Sesame Street, Hoots the Owl, like he's like my first understanding of the saxophone from Sesame Street, and he's very cool. So I just thought it was cool. And then I remember pestering my parents when I was in about year 4, because they did want me to play another instrument, and like they to kind of argue with them a bit and say, look, I'm not going to quit like the piano. I really like this one's cool. And then saxophone it was, and then had my first lesson, and I've sort of never looked back, actually. Yeah, so it's not no deep reason. It was just cool, and I'm shallow. So.
Fair enough, and it's not a bad answer at all. And I have to correct you there. The saxophone was cool in the 90s. It may not have been as popular, but
well, there was Kenny G by the 90s, but I was too young to care.
Oh, we don't mention the G here, but
we
definitely there was definitely ska bands and things like that for sure. No, Kenny G's okay. If you like him, that's up to you. That's all good.
Pass no judgments. That's fine.
Exactly. We don't discriminate. Now, you are originally from a small coastal town, well, not so small these days, down south of Sydney, called Wollongong, for those who may not know.
Yep.
And that's essentially where you started your saxophone journey. Can you talk a little bit about sort of your early saxophone education and your early experiences leading up to, where you ended up studying at the Con as your undergrad?
Yeah, so it was a wild and bumpy journey in a way. So I started playing saxophone, and I didn't even know how, but my parents found this teacher in Woonona, which is like actually half an hour far away from where we lived, but I don't know how Mum found him. His name is Mick Burgess, and he's still alive. I don't think he's teaching. He's still going though. He was like doing gigs not that long ago. Anyway, he's amazing. He's an amazing. It was just so fun. So we had my first lessons for the first almost 10 years of my playing. They weren't really lessons. They were just like jam sessions. So basically I would go in there every week, and he'd have a tune, and it could be any tune. Some weeks it was like ABBA songs, some weeks it was like Dixieland songs, some weeks it was like a classical. And he played guitar, and I'd play the tune on the saxophone, and we'd like have a little jam session, and then I'd take that tune away across the week and come back the next week, and it was another tune. So it was just like every week. So it just, and this was for years and years and years. Like it was just always different material. So I just must have read through a million things. And he was not at all a technical teacher. Like I don't think he mentions tonguing or diaphragm or like certainly not vibrato at all once ever. We did scales, we did major scales, but minor scales I don't think I did till I got to Sydney. So just like we did major scales. And he gave me the 2 books, the Universal Method book, that one, you know, it's
Paul
amazing
Bill. Yep.
Yeah. And then he gave me the Charlie Parker Omni book as I got a bit more advanced. And other than that, it was like every week, new tune, jam session. And it was just fun. It was like nonstop, mucking around, fun, improvising, try this, try it from memory. It was really like creative. And I'd love to have some of that in my teaching. Like, I know we'll speak later on about teaching, but it was that kind of thing. I didn't know I was learning, that kind of thing. Because it was just fun. And I knew it, like my parents were always playing music. So I knew a lot of like old timer music anyway, a lot of old Sinatra songs and a lot of like Beatles songs. I knew them orally anyway. So I'd rock up one week and he'd have Yesterday, but I already knew Yesterday. So I'd like by ear. So it was really like, it's not at all like the typical music education in that I see happens a lot here in Sydney in terms of grades and bands and all that kind of stuff. It was like totally choose your own adventure, free form fun. And it was awesome. And I think that's what really did it for me. It was just straight up and down playing. And I did that for years. And then in about year 8 or year 9, so it's from year 4 to year 9, I think it was year 9, Mum decided that I should get myself some classical technique or some technique. So she sent me along to Wollongong Conservatorium because like she'd noticed that we never did anything technical in these lessons. So she sent me over to Wollongong Conservatorium where the teacher there was a man named Nigel Edwards, who I know he taught like Loretta and some other people that ended up at Sydney Con. And he's a bassoon player by trade and he's a fabulous musician, great composer, not at all really a saxophone player. And he told me a whole bunch of stuff that I ended up having to unlearn and redo. And like I had some pretty crazy technical things going on. But what he did 2 amazing things for me. He again, like threw all this unusual and weird and wonderful music at me, not just the standard repertoire, but sort of newer compositions and his own compositions. So it was really like open slather, like nothing is off limits kind of saxophone approach. And then it's really weird now that I think about it, but he ran the orchestra, the BHP Youth Orchestra.
Yeah, right.
And he didn't have any oboes in the orchestra, so he got me in the orchestra when I was in about year 9, playing the oboe parts on soprano saxophone. But it was kind of awesome also for my transposing. So he just chucked me the oboe parts. Me and I don't know if you remember David Shuttleworth. Remember that guy?
Yeah, rings a bell. Yeah.
He was doing it too. So we'd play the oboe part. So I was like getting all this amazing orchestral experience from like year 9 all the way to year 12. And I thought it was normal to have saxophones like playing in orchestras like that. I didn't realize till I got to Sydney, like basically I played in an orchestra to the end of high school and then I didn't play in an orchestra again until like I was like master's level. You know what I mean? But they're the 2 big things that he did to me. So yeah, it was a really, I think, unusual way to arrive in Sydney. And when I arrived in Sydney, I didn't know what I was in for at all. But yeah, that's kind of how I got there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, talking about your experience at Sydney, so that's sort of where I first met you at the con back in
I remember
the good old days. So obviously it was a bit of a culture shock for you, from what you've been saying. Can you maybe talk a bit about your, like during your time doing your undergrad there? Now, we went on many adventures as well during the undergrad, and I know for a fact, we went and did some additional studies whilst we were there over at a summer school in a small town in the south of France called Gap. But while we were at the con, there was also a lot of opportunities that we had to perform and work with other musicians, and it was really quite interesting. Can you tell us about your experiences and what sort of things you got out there?
It was amazing getting to Sydney Con. That first year was brutal. Like, because I just felt so, like also I'd moved away, like I was still going back to Wollongong all the time, but I had like the moving away from home thing going on, had a girlfriend still in Wollongong, you probably remember drama surrounding that, right? And, but like my technique was just like, I don't think I'd ever used my tongue right. And I'd like, Nigel, my old teacher, like my mouthpiece when I got to Sydney Con was like a 4C that he'd shaved down with sandpaper, and I was using size like 5 reeds and like air vibrato. So I got to my first lesson with Christina Leonard, and like she pulled it apart in the way that she does, and it took like minutes to put it all back together, many years. So that first year especially, like yeah, I worked pretty hard to I think a lot of people quit in that phase, and I'm glad I didn't, but I thought about it a lot, because like you guys already had your things going and you guys were already like playing right. Because in some ways I was really lucky. I was like in there around the same vintage as yourself and Smitty and Jay and Ben Carey and all these great players. I was lucky because I kind of could be in on that scene, but also when I first got there, I was just super intimidated, and you just had all your skills together, and I was like, well, I can't even tongue. You know what I mean? So the first year was brutal like that, and I worked really hard. I kind of put it together, and Christina's amazing. She's such a reconstruction specialist, and she still does it now. Like
she's great at rebuilding players from scratch.
So she turned around. By the like end of first year into second year, I started to feel like, oh, okay, like this is, I know what tonguing is now, and I know how to do some vibrato. Not good, but something. And then it ended up, like, I think the best thing about Sydney Con was, not to sound cheesy, but just being in and around you guys. We had such a vibe. We had such a scene. Can you hear me? You just froze.
No, I'm still good. I'm still here.
Yeah, we had such a clique, right? Such a gang. Like yourself and the other boys in Nexus, so Smitty and Jay, the old timers like Harry White, and then all the other people. It was such a community that Mark had created for us there. And I learned so much. We all learned so much just from being in this tiny little intense saxophone bubble and kind of geeing each other up, and in a good, positive way, like really pushing each other to get better and better and better and better. Yeah, so that was like, it was amazing. Those 4 years of Sydney Con were amazing. And then adding to that is those trips that we did, like the Gap trip. So did we do 1 or 2 together?
We did 1, but
you
went on and did 2.
I went and did another one. We did that first one, which was like, it blew all of our minds, right? Like you were there. I don't think I've ever been the same since that first one. Because we had our thing going and we thought we were all pretty good. You know what I mean? And then we got there and it was like, oh, okay, there's like 15-year-old kids who are like playing faster better than me, you know? It was so world opening, basically. That first trip. I went back another time, and then I did another like BBM study trip, a similar kind of thing. But that first one especially, my mind just went bang. And it was just it's just also the excitement of being overseas, but those teachers that they have then, like, just, you know, having a lesson with Claude DeLong. I've been listening to his CDs every day for, like, since I got to Sydney Con, and then, like, I got to have a lesson with him, you know, and Arno Bornkamp, who, like, still probably the CD I listen to, one of the most frequently listened to CDs of mine, anything Arno's done, right? And, like, having a lesson with him was just totally mind-blowing, right? And I think I bought a saxophone on that trip as well, so it was, like, it was huge. And yeah, I remember coming back, and I don't know, part of me was like really deflated because like I had to leave, but then part of me was like really motivated to like, okay, like I know what the bigger game looks like now, if you know what I mean. So it kind of spurred us all on to go harder. So it was super cool. And anyone who like has a chance to do that Gap summer school, you got to do it. Like, I'm sure it's still amazing. Yeah.
For sure.
Love to do it again. I'd almost do it again just to, you know, because you can be like the watching. I don't think I'd play. I'd get too nervous now to play. But it's just to watch, like be the observer would be super cool. And even the concerts, like, were you there the Vincent David concert? Like the first time we went, it was the second, both times. But like I've just never heard anyone do those kinds of things on the saxophone. Do you know what I mean? Like when Vincent David gets up there and he's doing like double tongue in the altissimo and like lap tonguing faster than I can like play a slurred C major scale. It was just like, whoa.
Technique that
technique burn. And it just blew my poor brain. And then Christian Wirth, like the most beautiful soprano saxophone playing I'd ever heard. I still have like tapes of those somewhere. I
wouldn't mention that in the interview, but anyway.
yeah. Sorry.
But no,
anyway,
I mean,
so
you were
just
spot
totally
on. Like,
mind blown.
and you got to remember, this is back in the day before internet was a big thing, and you know it was really hard to get access to recordings. So it was quite a big deal for us.
Well, we all did it. We all went and bought their CDs too. So like not only was it amazing to hear them in concert, but they were selling CDs. So like I spent money I didn't have just buying everyone's like CD for €10 after the lesson, right? To beef up. And like your CD collection and how many discs you had was like, it's like, it was your street cred almost. And but we also had a really good community of sharing them. So I'm sure I bummed a whole bunch of CDs of classical saxophone stuff and probably other things too from you and vice versa. And Smitty, like we had a little pool, because it wasn't like kids these days, with Spotify. And in some ways that made it better, because when you got a CD, you bloody listened to it and you paid attention to it. And I notice it with my students now, because it's there on Spotify and it's there forever. And like there's 500 different versions of the Creston Sonata. And I'm guilty of this myself. You don't pay as much attention to it. Whereas when you have like the one recording of the Creston Sonata you could find, which for me was the Anna Bornkamp one, then you just listen to it again and again and again and again. And that is actually really valuable, and it's harder to be disciplined enough to do that now in the modern age. So in some ways the kids are missing out, I think. Scarcity is a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, the jazz guys who, like, they transcribe, solos and stuff like that, and, they really, they know the solo inside out through, repetitive listening. And, for us as classical players, there's certainly an element of that we can still do. And as you say, like, find a recording you really love and just, really get into it and, get familiar with the nuance of what's being played. And it really goes a long way to helping develop your own interpretation of works.
I think it's a huge mistake, like, that we make, the classical pedagogy can make, it shouldn't, but it does. Like, well, I think we need to be more like the jazz pedagogy, and that's what they do. They do their transcriptions, and they copy recordings, and they listen, and they internalize recordings. And that's not something that seems to be pushed on the classical people in the same way. And I think it really should be. Like, I think we should actually approach learning. I remember doing it, like, especially with Tableau de Provence. I tried to do it, like, copy Claude Delong's recording, like, slower. You know what I mean? And I think everyone should really do that with everything, where you have, like, this is my template and I'm going to copy this, in the same way that the jazz guys do. Like, they'll learn the chord solo and copy it and learn everything about it. And I think that actually should be a part of our pedagogy, because that's actually how you learn more than anything. But I don't know why the classical tradition stopped doing that. Maybe I just didn't think of it until, like, I got later into the con. But I think that's something that's missing. Whereas the jazz guys do it, like, automatically. It's like their first port of call, and I think that's 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, it's definitely, the critical listening is something that really just you can't do without, really.
Totally.
Now we sort of went a little bit off topic, but we'll just bring it back a little bit. Now, once you finished at the con, you graduated. You came pretty good. You actually graduated with first class honors, I believe. So you did pretty good.
There we go.
And then you took a little bit of a break, and then you ended up doing some further studies. You went for another round, but this time you went over to Italy, Milan, in fact, and studied with the awesome Mario Marzia. Can you tell us, first of all, why study with Mario, first of all, and can you tell us about how you sort of, what was it like studying in Milan with him in that class?
Well, that was an amazing couple of years. So you're right, I had like 2 years just doing teaching a bucket, and I tried to do gigs, but nothing was really like exciting happening. Anyway, and then, well, what actually happened, it's like, it totally didn't go the way it was supposed to go, but it ended up being really awesome. I don't know if you remember, because I'm sure I told you back in the day. So in about 2006, 2007, the Milan Con ran this like extra part of their course. So you could do like the Milan Con class with Mario Bontempo and the teachers there. But then once a month, Londex was going to come to town, and he did in 2000, come to town, and you could actually get your diploma as a Londex student, because once a month he was going to come to town for like a couple of days, and you have a lesson with Londex. I'm like, oh man, I've got to do that. That sounds like straight from the horses. That was the plan, straight from the horse's mouth. So like for me, it hit all the sweet spots, because I wanted to live in Italy. Just culturally, I had family there, and like Italian surname. I felt like I needed to spend a portion of my life in Italy, just because, things aside from saxophone, I felt like it's something I needed to try out. And then when I saw that I could like have some study with the Italian guys, but then Londex would be coming, I'm like, whoa, sign me up. So I wrote to them and said, "You're going to run this again?" They're like, yeah, sure, come on over. So I went on over And then I sort of did the thing, and I ended up mostly studying with Marco Bontempo. I had some sessions with Marti, but my main teacher ended up being Bontempo, which is the other guy who was like
Okay.
phenomenal. But anyway, after a couple of like months there, it became obvious that the Londex thing wasn't going to happen, because by that point he was already 80 odd years old. But by then I was like pretty settled in, and I was really happy. And it worked out for the best anyway, but it wasn't like it like it was supposed to be like a little bit of Marti and then a whole bunch of Londex, and ended up being a whole bunch of Marco Bontempo, who I'd never even heard of before, and then a little bit of Marti. So, but it was amazing. So Bontempo, the guy that I ended up being like mostly having most of my lessons with, he's an amazing amazing musician, amazing teacher. He really got in my head in the same way that I know we've discussed it before. Like someone like Jean-Denis Michat can kind of get in your head and like find out what's going on and then redirect you in the way that you need to be going. Yeah, he did that to me big time over those 2 years. So I was there 2 years, and it was amazing. Like it was really, it's probably like one of the better decisions that I've made was going. Like, yeah, I think what was particularly what is really good about doing something like that was just the focused on the isolation factor, if you will. Like I went over there, I had no real friends or family. Like I made friends, but like I had no distractions. I wasn't teaching, wasn't like trying to do gigs and things here. I didn't have my normal life here. Like I did here. It was just me and the saxophone, if you know what I mean. And I worked really hard. It was like total ninja style. I was doing like minimum 5 to 6 hours practice a day, and then on top of that rehearsals, and the course there was great because it was like all Italian things. It was very open, very choose your own adventure. I could do whatever the hell I liked. Just waving to Jay. And like, so I only had to go into the con like maybe 2 or 3 hours a week, and the rest of the time was just practice. I had this like filthy little dungeon space because I lived in like a boarding house. And the guys didn't want me to practice in my room because like they're all studying to be lawyers and doctors, and
Right.
they didn't want the noise. But they found I practiced in like it's called the Quadri Elettrici. It was like it's like the fuse box room, because it was a really big building. It was just a room where they had all the fuse boxes and gas meters and stuff. It was in the basement level. It was like filthy little hovel of a room. I was in there just all day, every day, just smashing out the practice big time. So it was a bit like, maybe I went a bit mad in that time, but that was what was amazing about that. That combined with just being away, but the sessions with Bontempo, who really I don't know, at some point through Sydney Con, I became a little bit, I lost sight of the forest for the trees in terms of my saxophone playing. I became a bit too obsessed with the saxophone and not thinking enough about just music and about even art, about what I was trying to do with the saxophone. I thought mostly only about the saxophone as opposed to what I wanted to do and say and about music. And he really turned me around on that. Like, I don't think we spoke about technique once. I kind of when I got to Milan, I thought I'd be practicing my double tongues and my slap tongues and my 4-octave scales, and I did that stuff, but that wasn't really what it was about at all. It was really about music, and I spent a lot of time just reading scores and stuff like that and going to gigs. The other thing about being in Milan was all the gigs that were rolling through town, and a lot of them I could get into for free. So all the gigs that happened in the con were free. So Hilary Hahn a couple of times, there's Stephen Isserlis and Andreas Schiff, and then La Scala was down the road, and that was €5. You know what I mean? You could go to La Scala for €5. So I was and I had nothing else to do. I would hang out with friends and get drunk on Saturdays, but the rest of the week was just I'd practice and then go to a concert that evening. So it's just 2 years of that. It was intense.
Yeah.
And yeah, I learned so much. Yeah, it changed my whole attitude to what I was trying to do in a healthy way, I think. Yeah.
Nice. And then, eventually you found your way back, and, we'll talk about what happened after that. But in terms of your sort of educational experiences to date, and maybe up to that point when you finished your studies in Milan, because we'll talk about your current studies at the moment later. But out of all that, what's probably what have you found was probably the most valuable lesson or the most valuable thing that you learnt? Or the most standout sort of, what should we say? Just the standout thing or pearl of wisdom that was given to you during this time that sort of is sticking with you to this day.
I think the thing that, and this, I guess it's the Bontempo that the teacher I had over there kind of maybe made me realize or told me, or this is for me, the whole process, at least in terms of saxophone playing, not in terms of like the composing and the other stuff. It's really quite simple. There are two things that you need to do. Just two things. You need to be able to do anything you can imagine on your saxophone, and then you need to be able to see a piece of music and imagine exactly how you want it to sound in great detail, exactly how you want that piece of music to sound. And if you can see the piece of music or hear the piece of music and know exactly how you want it to sound, and you have enough technical fluency on your instrument to realize your imagination, then that's all that we're trying to do. There's only two things. So enough control over your horn to do whatever you want, and then you need to have the knowledge and the culture, the understanding of music to be able to clearly create an idea of exactly how you want this melody, this like phrase, whatever, to sound. That's the hard part though, like being able to know exactly how you want something to sound and then deliver it through your saxophone. Because then, like, if you know exactly how you want it to sound and you try to play it and your technique isn't there, then you'll catch your technique up. You're like, oh, well, that sucked because I couldn't play a nice in-tune B, you know? And then you'll practice your tuning on your Bs. But like, if you don't actually know how you want it to sound before you play it or while you're playing it, if you can't hear it in your head while you're playing it, again, the jazz guys do this better than us, I think. Yeah. If you can't hear it in your head while you're playing it, then like, what are you trying to do? You're trying to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. So having this really crystal clear as you can idea of how you want something to sound, and it can even be changing, especially in chamber music, it can change as you're playing it, but like having a musical goal in your mind, and then having the chops to back that up, that's all you have to do. So for me, it's just became just two things, you know.
Cool.
Yeah. Chops and imagination.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't mind a set of chops myself anyway.
Oh, well, exactly. Yeah. But it makes you work harder on your chops because like then all of a sudden like you know how you want it to sound and then you realize how crap you are and that you can't make it sound like you want it to sound and then you have to play your long tones more, you know. So
yeah. All right. Cool. No, it's a good one. Now we'll talk about your performance career. Now, as we said at the start, you've pretty much like, you know, you've sort of like won most of the prestigious classical music awards here in Australia.
I missed a few.
A couple. And you've also got, you know, a rap sheet of orchestral experience as long as your arm. As I said, it's probably easy just to list the orchestra you haven't played with because I think there's only one you haven't played with yet.
You're too kind.
Yeah. But just before we sort of talk about, you know, sort of that YPA experience, just your sort of early career in music in terms of pre the YPA, what sort of experience, sort of opportunities and experiences did you have? Did you wait for the phone to ring? Did you get called up, referred to stuff, or did you create some opportunities? Like, talk us through it.
The phone is still basically never rung. I know you know that too, right?
I know, yeah.
So that would be a terrible, terrible career. So the one thing I did in that little period before I went to Italy is I started working with Murillo. I set up the duo Histoire. That was like in those years. And that was like the best thing and like the hardest and scariest thing I've ever done in a way other than like things outside of music. The scariest thing I've ever, just like having the balls to call Murillo and say, hey man, like we just graduated, but like let's put on a concert, let's do something. And I booked, I don't know if you remember the Dome Bar, you were probably there.
Yeah,
like
I remember
Dome
that
Bar on Crown Street. I booked that in and like I was packing it, but I felt like I had to do something. And that's my advice to anyone graduating from the con is you got to do something. I was at least wise enough to realize that if I didn't create some product, make some ensemble, then I was going to have to find another job. So because there was no one was going to call me. Maybe Jim had told me that already, like maybe Christina had told me that already, but I was well aware that like it was like do it yourself or it will not happen. And that is exactly it's still like that. I thought one day it would get better, but it doesn't. It actually seems to get worse. Maybe it's because the scene is getting harder, or maybe just because like I'm getting fussier. I don't know. It's still exactly like that. So like I set up the duo Histoire and we made a little album in those first years as well, which like, and was super cool. I learned so much doing that. The CD is terrible, but like I learned, I should find it anyway. But I learned like I had to get it funded and I had like to find people to make me do it. And I learned so much doing that and rehearsing that. And it's actually in a way when I did that CD that I realized how much better I needed to get at the saxophone too. In some ways doing that CD and that whole project, we did like little tours and stuff around that CD. That made me realize I needed to get better at the saxophone because I wasn't happy with like what I was putting up. I didn't think it was good enough. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that was really important. But just, I learned so much in those couple of years before I went to Italy about like trying to get something off the ground. And all it is like just trial and error, and keep searching, keep looking, keep badgering, keep going. Because the moment you stop pushing is the moment you stop having a project to play with. Like,
Yeah.
So, and I'm
exactly,
sure you know that too, because you've seen it. You've seen it. We've all seen it, right?
yeah,
So,
you're right. Like, it's one of those things. Like, to be, in the scene and active, you kind of have to be proactive in
yep.
creating opportunities for yourself, and you email people, and the worst thing they say is no.
Yeah, make them say no, exactly. But
Yeah.
gigs breed gigs. So, like, if you do a little gig, then often you end up with some gigs off the back if it goes well and if it's good. So you'll get gigs off the back of it. So, like, I did that stuff with Murillo, and we did that Dome Bar, and around the same time Mark organized the Mungandai Festival. So then I hassled and asked Mark, didn't have to hassle. Mark was extremely welcoming. So with Duo Histoire, I ended up playing in Mungandai, and then off the back of Mungandai, we met this guy in Tasmania, so we ended up playing in Tasmania. Do you know what I mean? And then from that, we had the CD, and we did some music clubs, and if you're not doing something, you can't expect anything to flow from it. But if you do something, then chances are, not all the time, but a lot of the time, you do something, if it's good, you will get some follow-on gigs. And I know you've seen that with Nexus. You do your amazing Peter Coleman Wright show, and then bang, 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 all of a sudden people are calling you because you've got a product that they want. So that's the thing. You've got to have a product, and it's got to be good, because then if you can get your product there, at least get it to a demo, then you've got something to try to sell to on sell. But that's the hard part. Yeah. Definitely. So gigs breed gigs. That's probably the other tip I'd had. So and they don't come from nowhere. So you have to do your first one and then hope that you breed some more from that one. Yeah.
And as you say, it's trial and error. It could take you a while before you find the thing that really is the thing. And it's also a lot of chance as well. Right place, right time. Make sure the right person's in the audience. Yeah.
Totally. But there's that great saying you can't be at the right place at the right time. So you have to be at the right place all of the time.
Yeah.
Kind of like that. So you have to be constantly on the spot with something excellent all the time, and trying to get as many people as you can to see your excellent little thing. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes, if you're doing that, every now and then you get an amazing phone call, but once a year you might get an amazing phone call or something out of the blue, maybe. But usually it's you've been badgering and hassling and speaking to someone for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden it actually comes off. Yeah. But you need to be in it. You need to be in the scene, making stuff, and that's also how you meet people. It's how you learn. It's how you meet people, and gigs breed gigs, and friends breed gigs. Basically, not in a sinister networky kind of. It can be people misunderstand that word.
It doesn't have to be cliquey.
Nah. It's just people need to know that what you're about and what you do, and that you do good things. I think I'm not a master of this stuff, but that's the way I see it. People just need to know that I'm out here trying my best, and I hope to do good things. And then people, especially in Sydney, it's a small world, small scene. People talk, people know. It's the same. Once you've been in the Sydney scene for 5 years, you basically know everyone, right? Maybe 10. So yeah. So, you've got to be proactive.
Wise words. And all the other previous guests we've had, when we ask them this question, they say the same thing. It's really, as you say, you're not really trained for this sort of thing. You kind of learn as you go, and
that's why you got to speak to Di Tolmie on the show. I know she's sort of researching that, and that's her. Especially no disrespect to Sydney Con, but they do prepare you as a lamb for slaughter. You know what I mean?
Well, having said that, Dave Thieck does run a music management course every 2 years. But funny you should mention that. Di's actually going to be a guest coming up soon.
There you go.
Don't tell anyone, but we'll mention that a bit later.
Good. I'll tune in for that.
Now, moving on to a next thing, we'll talk about the YPA, because obviously this is sort of a really, this was a big thing for you, not in terms of the preparation, because I remember seeing you, we used to teach at this school, and you'd be practicing for, hours and hours and hours, and you just sort of you look like you hadn't seen the sun for weeks, and then the whole process of the competition, and then getting right to the end and the finish, and that sort of was a real big turning point for you. And it's quite a big deal, because you were the second saxophonist to win this competition, the first one being Amy Dixon. Amy, if you happen to be watching, shoot me an email, because we'd love to have you on the show. Anyway, it really did sort of propel you. But could you talk us through the experience in preparing for the competition? Because as I said, you worked really hard on it, and I think there was a lot of sort of that went into sort of getting the work up, and particularly preparing that Yoshimatsu concerto as well.
Yeah. I was lucky in that, like, that was it. So I got back from Italy in 2010 and what, or 2011, I did my last one. Like, it was like I just finished my time in Europe. So I'd just been doing these big, fully intense practice hours. So I was in that headspace still. Like, I don't know how it would be now, but like I was like game fit, if you don't know, match fit, whatever that expression is. Like I was in the right, but, and I don't know, like yeah, I practiced heaps. I had a lot less teaching on because I was just back from Europe. So I would have still been doing like multiple hours a day, like on the first round. So the first round, like back then, it's totally different now. It was like a recital. So I played like Tableau de Provence, and I played like some Barry Cockcroft, and I played some Telemann and things like that. But I knew that stuff backwards. I think I did the whole 40 minutes from memory. Like that's another thing I really like picked up in those years. Just like, again, it was more like I was saying before about being able to imagine stuff. I find if I'm doing stuff from memory, if I pass the nerves of playing from memory, I can hear it in my head better. Like the stand becomes a distraction because like I'm trying to like try to do it up here, not here in front of me. I don't know if that makes any sense. So like, yeah, I was super prepared, practicing heaps, and then I got through and I was pumped. But I really wanted it. Like it was like my plan. Basically, it was like I got to come back, and I knew I was going to play. I'm going to come back. I'm going to play Cyberbird Concerto because that's the kind of concerto you could maybe win something like that with, like because it's so saxophony and such a great little exciting fun piece. So it was like I thought it through in a way. Like it was super lucky, but like I thought it might work because Cyberbird is exciting and like you got to think you're going to have to get up there at the end if you make it and play, and the violinist is going to play Tchaikovsky and the piano player is going to play Rachmaninoff, so you can't get up there and play Glazunov. It's not going to cut it. No disrespect to Glazunov, it's a beautiful piece, I love it, but it's not like fireworks saxophone style, whereas Cyberbird you can make it fireworks saxophone style with like those wild free sections and glisses and slaps and wild stuff. So I think the piece won it for me. I think like I like to think I did a good job, but like I think I picked the right piece as well. And yeah, I practiced it heaps. I was running it multiple times a day from memory. This is probably before the Adelaide round, before the semi-final round. I'd probably already been running it like 2 or 3 times a day from memory for the 3 or 4 months before like the final, like, from when I found out I was going to be doing it. And I remember like I think I went to an Amy Dixon masterclass, and I remember her saying something like when she was preparing for a concerto in terms of memory, she didn't feel comfortable from memory until she could like read the newspaper and play a concerto at the same time. So I got it to that level, and I do that now as well. Like it kills you. It can kill the music, so you have to be careful. But like when you know something so well that you could be like reading the newspaper and actually like understanding the news, but playing a concerto, that means you don't have to worry about the memory anymore, right? So I got it to that stage like 3 months before the bloody gig, and then I just kept playing and play it along with the recordings and like organize a little like concert because I'd never done it with piano. I'd never done it obviously with orchestra, but I organized a concert with David Howie and put it on, and then Adelaide, which was the semi-final, came around, and I don't know if you remember the ash cloud, the explosion in Bali,
Yeah.
that came along, and that was like the day before, so the flights were all shut down, and I wasn't able to get on my flight. And then the lady Anna Howe called me. She's like, "We don't know if you're gonna make it. Like, you know,
Wow.
sorry." I'm like, "Oh," and I was like gutted because I'd spent like my life preparing this thing. Just waving, preparing this thing, and then like I managed to get on. Like I was considering driving, and if I'd driven, I'd have got there the day of the final. Anyway, it didn't come out that badly, but I got a flight. I missed the first rehearsal, so I had just one rehearsal, and then the general, and then the concerto, and I was like packing, like, the most nervous I've ever been. Like actually, other than the other times later on. And then it went really well. That was good. And then the other thing about doing a big gig like that, so like I did it and I won. I was really excited with the semi-final. And then I just couldn't sleep after that. I was really wired and buzzed. And then it sunk in that I was going to have to do it again for Brisbane for the final. And then at least then I'd done it once before. So the final actually was less stressful because it didn't have the problem of the big ash cloud and nearly missing the gig. And I'd at least knew that I could do it because I'd done it before, like in the semi. Yeah. So I practiced a lot, but I felt more like confident, and I already felt like I was a winner because I got to the final, which was like I kind of thought if I could make the final, that like play with an orchestra, that was a big tick, that was it. And then the final just went my way, like just sheer luck. Like as Emily's son, who the violinist, she won it like a year or two ago, so she was a fair bit younger than me. She was 21 or 19 or 20, and I was 27. She's an absolute monster. I bumped into her last year at Royal College. She's teaching at the Royal College.
Oh,
You know
wow.
what I mean? Like in London. Like, she's a monster. So like I got lucky. And I do think like the piece in a way like really helped get me there, because it was so, they'd never seen anything like it, you know. It's so saxophony and jazzy. So yeah, that was huge. And then winning that was like, it messed me up in a way for a little while afterwards, just in terms of like I couldn't sleep. And like you may have had this with really, really big gigs. You ever have a really big gig and then you do the gig, unless you've gone drinking, which I didn't because I was kind of by myself, like I just couldn't sleep, and then the next day I couldn't kind of function. And have you ever had that? Or is it just me?
No, that's the thing. Like it's really hard to sort of switch off.
Especially where you poured, like it's happened a few times when you've been pouring that effort in for so long, like, you know, months and months, really years, because this is all like off the back of the time in Europe, so years of intense, and then like this is just a dream come true. A risk of sounding totally lame, it was, you know what I mean? So like when it actually paid off, like I didn't know myself. I was like genuinely proper stunned, and it was amazing. Like it was lucky. Yeah.
Well, it's glad that ash cloud didn't affect things. You really don't have a lot of luck with modes of transport, but we'll talk about that.
Talk about that. What you between flights and smash saxophones and cruise ships? Or...
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Pretty much
I know where you're going
bases.
with that.
Yeah. So obviously, it was a huge thing, and if you haven't already checked it out, the Cyberbird Concerto by Yoshimatsu is a fantastic piece.
Yeah.
I believe it's published now, so you can play the reduction. So
Great. Because the reduction was a mess. That's the other thing. I had to learn it from like this bootleg reduction because you couldn't find it. And then they nearly pulled the plug because they didn't think they could get the parts. Like this is about a week before Adelaide, and like, could you play something else? Like this before the ash cloud, they called me up and like, we don't know if we can get these parts. You know, it's some weird bootleg thing going on with that piece. Do you have anything else? I'm like, are you fucking serious? I've spent like 9 months mastering this thing. I thought, what am I going to play? Tableau? Like, it's not the same. Like, I've got to play this piece.
Yeah, I know.
And then it all worked out. But it was like, so much of it was luck. Like, so much of it. Gosh, it seems like a long time ago. Well, it was a long time ago. But it really like changed a lot of things. It changed a lot of things, and then it also changes nothing in a way. So super.
Well, just sort of on that note, so obviously the YPA, sort of was a big door opener for you. Can you tell us about what sort of opportunities you ended up with post YPA? What sort of doors did it open for you?
Yeah, I still think I get some gigs off the back of it. Do you know what I mean? It's like 10 years later. Just having that, it's like that brand or something. It's like a seal of approval or something like that. It was big. So like the year after that, must have been 2012, is like I had I don't know how many, but a couple, like a bunch of concerto gigs. So I did Cyberbird like 2 or 3 more times, including like the Symphony in the Domain, those kind of like epic gigs. And I did like the regional tour with SSO doing Glazunov, like big, like crazy, out of your mind, dream world sort of gigs. Do you know what I mean? And you almost start to think like this could go on forever. Like part of you knows it won't. But it was just totally, career changing in that sense. But just the experience of doing those kind of gigs was huge. And a couple of ABC recordings off the back of that. Even after like the earlier rounds, they got me in to do like an ABC recording, like one of the radio ones, and then another one as part of the demo. And then like that's also how you meet then people at the ABC who mostly lost their jobs now. That's another story. You meet a lot of people, and people sort of kind of now know who you are and what you're about a little bit more. So it opened up a hell of a lot of doors, and a lot of gigs that you just were never going to get otherwise, because people have this like saxophone that's not even a classical instrument, but like if they know that you won YPA, they might give you a chance. So it helped a bit like that. So I had a string of like incredibly like big and exciting gigs off that. And then, I still think every now and then something comes my way, largely still off the back of that. Like last year I got to do Iber with the fellows, and Roger Benedict, I think, called me in on that. I think it's because he knows me from when I did Cyberbird and stuff with the SSO. So it's the gifts that keeps on giving. Even getting in at the con and knowing the people that like to do the doctorate and get the scholarship, being allowed to do this hybrid composition stuff. I feel like even YPA had a factor in on that, because I kind of already knew them all from other things that I'd done through YPA. It introduces you with a fanfare to the musical industry.
Right. So it's a bit like a Willy Wonka golden ticket almost.
It was a bit of a Willy Wonka golden ticket in those first few years. Now I'm
Right.
like old and no one cares anymore. It's fine. But
Yeah.
it was like a nice introduction to crash into the scene, if that
Okay.
makes
Cool.
any sense. Yeah, it doesn't go on forever, and it's not like it's you still have to do something with it. You still have to have something to offer the scene. Otherwise, you'll just do your like two concertos the next year, and then people will forget about you because there's like, since I won it, there's been 8, 9 other winners, right? So like, there's just one every year. It's like
Yeah.
like Big Brother on TV. No one remembers like anymore. But like, if it introduces you to the scene, and if you can then continue to produce something good, which I hope to do, or hope to continue to do, whatever, then you can kind of get yourself a little more established. Yeah, which is
Right.
yeah.
Cool.
I think
Now,
that's what it me. Yeah.
sort of like going on with that, it also like some of the opportunities you got there was also being able to play in the section of the orchestra, so not necessarily out the front, but also in there. And I know you and I had a few fun gigs with the Sydney Symphony, but you also did AOBO and stuff. In terms of orchestral gigs, like where you're obviously not the soloist, but more in the sections per se. How was there any sort of like an orchestral highlight for you in terms of like a piece of repertoire that you really enjoyed, or a concert, or working with a certain musician, or
In terms of being in the band,
section?
Like, I mean, every time you get to do it, you just pinch yourself I always, like, every time I do it, I pinch myself, say, this is amazing, and you're probably never going to get to do this again. Like, and I try to bring that, so you better enjoy it, because you're probably never going to get to do this again, because it's so fickle anyway.
Yeah.
But the most memorable and exciting thing that I did was the Australian World Orchestra, the Bolero with AW. Because, man, those guys could play. Holy smokes, that string section, never heard anything like it. And like,
and that's like the all-star orchestra, right?
Yeah, man, they could play. So it's players from all over the world. So like, I was there, it was my first Bolero. So I was like a Bolero virgin. But like the violinists are from Berlin Phil and Vienna Phil and New York Phil and London Symph, and like it's just the most crazy all-star group of freaks you ever can imagine, and I did not belong. But like, I think I did a good job. I did my best. Like, they seemed happy, and like, just to be on stage and to hear, like, the music was so alive. Like there's a few gigs that I've done over the years where the music is like, you can almost touch it. It's alive. And that gig was like that, if you know what I mean. So like, yeah, you got the big solo, and I like got so nervous I pooed my pants, but I think I did a good job. But even after the solo is better, because then you could just sit back for a bit and like listen and chill and just play in the big tutti section of Bolero. And it was like, not that I've ever been much of a surfer, but like playing the tutti section of Bolero with that orchestra was like surfing a wave. It was like, it had motion. Yeah, that was just huge. So I got to do it at the Opera House, and then we did it in Singapore too, which was
and you did it on a plane, I believe, as well.
Yeah, and on a plane. The plane was less musical, but pretty fun. Yeah. We did like some stunt on the plane just to promote. It was to promote Qantas, because Qantas had paid for it all or whatever, They're not going to do that this year. Anyway, So, yeah, we did it on the plane. I forgot about that. Yeah, so that was pretty random. But certainly that was like, probably will be, like, it's right up there with one of the most memorable musical experiences ever, because those guys are freaks. So if you ever get the chance to go, like, hear them, yeah, you got to go.
Do it.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, being one of the few people to work with, a professional symphony orchestra, it's always interesting to sort of hear, how like advice in terms of, say for a student wanting to work on preparing, like they might have their first orchestral gig or something like that. How does it? Do you feel like there's a difference in the way that you would prepare for an orchestral piece as opposed to a solo work or a chamber work? And is there any advice that you could give to someone looking to sort of sit in the orchestra for the first time?
I think in some ways I try now at least that I'm older and bolder, for things in a similar way. I think the real trick is you don't want to only know your part, you want to know everyone's part. Like, I think if you want to do a good job, you should almost be able to conduct it. Like, you need to know exactly like the full story, whether you're working saxophone and piano, saxophone and string quartet, or like you're playing like alto two in an orchestra. You're not going to do that good a job unless you actually completely comprehend everything that's happening around you.
Yeah. So that's the same with any piece of music, really. Like, knowing the piano part and quartet parts, knowing all the other parts.
I think that's the big one. And for me, that was really important with the orchestra. That and just like, and again, this is a global thing. Just get your listening ears on. You just got to have ears as big as saucepans and listening, especially like following conductors still does my head in a bit. Like I watch and I try to follow, but like you have these experiences where the conductor does this and then like 30 seconds later, the orchestra starts. Like I don't have enough, like I have some orchestral experience from a saxophone player, but that's bugger all compared to like the guys who do that all day, every day. Like I do not call myself an experienced orchestral musician by any like lightning measure of stick, you know, like, so compared to those guys, I'm a total always rank amateur. So you just it works if you just listen more, listen to your section and listen to your like your co-saxophone partners in crime and your clarinet, the wind section, listen, and then know the score, know everything.
Yeah.
Like, ideally the whole score for everything, but at least the bits where you're bloody playing. Like, I think that's like, that would probably be my advice. I think other people might have different advice. Maybe you want to think about using different setups and things like that, but I never change really setups for different gigs. I always think like a good setup is a setup I can do anything I want on. But maybe other people would think about that. For me, it's like, nah, it's just about knowing the job that needs to be done. So know your part. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, we talked about, you know, you remarkable soloist and just mentioned the orchestral playing side of things, but you're also a fantastic chamber musician, and you talked about your work with Murillo and duo Histoire, but you've also got involved in a couple other projects. One of the recent ones you put together is the Golden Age project. Can you tell us a bit about this and what's it about?
Okay, where do I start with this one? It's been really fun, and this like was all like cooking up until COVID came in. So like, my wife is like a historical musician, does like period performance, Baroque kind of, not so much Baroque now. She's doing more like early 20th century, but anyway, no one, like, whatever. But like period performance, she's really into this idea of like understanding how music was played in its day. And like just chatting with her, like, I don't know, we got chatting about like the early 20th century saxophones, and I was telling her all about like the C melody saxophone and Rudy Wiedoeft and those guys, and how amazing it was, and how it was like a whole style of playing that's basically disappeared, let alone the instrument itself. The C melody is like, you know, in oblivion. But even the way that they play is different, and certainly the ability with which someone like Rudy Wiedoeft, Al Goladero, the way that those guys could play is like almost unsurpassed, right? The agility that they had on the saxophone. Anyway, and then like, I don't know, we just decided, because it's so hard, like I was saying before, to get projects up and off the ground. So it's good to have a partner in crime, and in some ways it's really good to have that partner in crime be your spouse, because, well, it's good in that you can work together and share the load, but it's terrible in that you like never stop working as well, and like you fight. It causes marital disharmony on certain days. But yeah, so we decided to work together on this Golden Age project. So she already had a string quartet that was doing like historical performance, but and kind of looking at early 20th century stuff. So the early 20th century, they were using like more combination gut strings with steel strings, sort of more combinations, and just playing in a different style. It's not so much about the gear, it's the style. The string players played differently, more in a way more expressively, more portamenti, more crazier tempos, really flexible tempos, things like that. So I bought a bloody C melody saxophone on Gumtree for $500, and it was like one of those old cons. And I took it over to Steve, and he fixed it up for another $150, and it's an amazingly beautiful sounding thing. And we tried it out. We did our first gig at that independent theater, whenever it was, year before last, and I practiced my bottom off to get that thing sounding okay. And I think I was okay that day, but I've gotten a lot better since then. I think I really started, when COVID hit, I really like started to hit my straps on the C melody, because I did re-record it at the end of last year as well. And man, it's been so good. I've really enjoyed it. So I also now have a like a Tuberry alto, 1927 Tuberry alto, and I was going to record on that, but I chickened out because I had only had it for a few weeks. But when we do the gigs, I'm going to play on that, on the Tuberry period horn, because it sounds totally different, and because it sounds totally different, you play it totally differently. I noticed that with this C melody and with Tuberry. I make different artistic decisions to the way I play on my regular sax because like the feedback coming back from the saxophone, it's like the saxophone wants to be played a different way, and I really noticed that with the C melody. So we had a mad time. It was all going really well. And then we've kind of been evolving it from there. So we did that original Rudy Wiedoeft style thing, which was super good. And then we got the CD coming out with that. But then I did, because I've been doing the composing stuff too, we did last year we did a Charlie Chaplin film. So I wrote like a live soundtrack to film. So kind of like what we did with the West Side Story thing. So we screened the Chaplin film and we played live to the film. And this year we were going to do a big thing all about, oh my God, Clive Armadio, the Armadio thing, because he's like the Aussie version of that.
Yeah.
He's a bit later. He's like 40s, but the Armadio thing. I was in touch with Len Armadio, Clive's son, and like it was all going to happen again in independent theatres. I was going to use like snatches from the radio show, like the old ABC broadcast, and intersperse them with some playing. It was going to be amazing, and that gig's officially not cancelled, but we can't do it now because I haven't done any work on it because I just assumed it was cancelled. It was going to be in November, so we will do that. So like this Golden Age thing has just become like a real source of like crazy, hectic new ideas. That like it's also good because like now I'm also marrying some of the composition into it as well.
Cool.
And I think we'll just keep doing it, keep finding little things that happen, I guess, in the first half of the 20th century, and try to think about how we could fit it under our umbrella. Yeah. So it was awesome. It's been awesome. So it started off as sax and strings, but it's kind of now morphing into like, so the Armadio thing was going to be almost like more like the Armadio Quartet. So piano and bass, saxophone, and violin, because my wife plays for free, so, so you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
For those who don't know, Clive Armadio is quite an important figure for saxophone in the 40s, particularly in the radio scene and popular music of the time. So there's a great biography out by Nigel Westlake. Or not? Is it Nigel? No.
No, it wasn't. But it's at the Con Library. It's called From Me to You or something like that. But he had like, so his radio show was like top, super popular, like the most popular radio show on a Sunday afternoon in Australia, across the country, playing like classical music and classical saxophone. He like premiered like most of the important works, like the Glass and the Ebert. He's the one who premiered them here in this country, like, and like a whole bunch of other stuff like that. He kind of brought the classical saxophone into people's living rooms, like across the country every Sunday for like 20 years. So it's like, I think it's really interesting and really important. So yeah.
Yeah,
check it out.
It's definitely an important part of particularly Australian saxophone music as well. Like it's definitely worth exploring that. So yeah, that sounds like a fantastic project. We'd love to check it out once gigs are up on again.
We need a vaccine, and then.
Well, if you need a bass sax, I've just got a.
Oh, bass sax, yeah. Oh Jesus. Yeah.
I'll just let you sit on that one. But so moving on as well. Now, one of the other groups that you're involved with, which all of us are aware of, is of course Continuum Sax.
Yeah.
Now, you and I sort of grew up with Continuum when we were young students, and they were kind of big. They were big idols for us in terms of what we would have liked to do when we're older, and we both had the good fortune that have our own. Oh, I have my own quartet, but you've also it went to the next level and actually got into Continuum once Jared Whitburn had moved on. Can you tell us how you sort of got involved? How did you get roped in Continuum? And
that was just super lucky timing. Like it was like I was saying that the phone never rings. Like, and then once in a year, something, or maybe once every 2 years, something random will happen and someone will actually call you, like very rarely. That was one of those like random things that you don't ever see coming. So, well, I guess what happened really was like I had been doing Nexus, remember? Way back.
I remember.
I went off to Italy.
Member. Yeah,
exactly. I went off to Italy and like, and then came back, and then you guys kind of got it all going. You were doing by the time I was back, you were working with Michael and stuff. So Nexus, like I wasn't really involved with a quartet just because of the way our lives had all played out. And I don't know what happened with Continuum, but like Jared left the group. I don't know I've never asked. It's like whatever. I've never really even met Jared, to be totally honest. Like I heard him play, but never really met him. So just one day randomly, Christina, it was Christina, because I knew her the best of that group because she was my old teacher, called me up and said, hey, you want to come and try playing with Continuum a bit? I'm like, oh, shit. Jesus, do I? That sounds amazing. They were like, like I had all their CDs, I was like, I'm a fan. Definitely. And I didn't even have a baritone saxophone at that point. So the original idea was maybe I would play tenor and Marty Kay was going to investigate a baritone. But I called up Damo, who we know, Damien Matheson, and I bought this old con just to go along and try it out. And they broke in the first rehearsal anyway, but whatever. And eventually I just, I love baritone anyway. I've always wanted to own a baritone. So that was my incentive. I just went and bought one like about a week or two later. And I think because I went and bought an instrument like within within a few days of being asked to do the gig, I think they knew that I was pretty serious. And then I went from there. And in those first few years that I was doing Continuum, well, I mean, I miss Continuum. Like now we don't do very much, but those first few years, we were actually pretty busy. Like it was like, actually it was all happening right around the YPA stuff as well. So it was just like this intense time where like things were just like coming up in my favor totally randomly between YPA and then doing the Continuum stuff. But it was like Continuum was quite more active than we've been obviously lately. So there was stuff going on. We did a gig with Sydney Chamber Choir, and we did like, I remember doing Bundanon residencies and gigs in Brisbane and Melbourne, and like it was happening. It was all on. So it was like hugely exciting, and to play with those guys was great. Like to play, and I've learned so much playing with Mun, Jim, and Christina. I really miss doing it. Now like it's a bit, well, Marty's in Brisbane and we're all hectic busy, and like I listened to some of Jim's interview that you did with him, and he explained like it's so difficult to run a quartet. Like I just take my hat off to Nexus so much for being able to keep it going. Quartet's harder. Like I've got the duo with Marilla, but that's really easy. There's only 2 people, which means there's only 2 people to like coordinate, only 2 people to keep happy, and only 2 people to pay, which I know it sounds horrible, but like people can afford to pay 2 people. But like when there's 4 people, that's a lot harder to make sure that everyone could take a day off teaching to do the gig, but not lose hundreds and hundreds of dollars, which was like what can often happen in a quartet, because you'll get a great gig and they'll want to pay you $200 and you'll have to cancel your $600 of teaching to do it, which of course you do it, but like that gets harder and harder as you get older and have children and mortgages. So that's the big kick in the guts. Like sometimes you get these amazing gigs and like you work so hard to get, and like from a financial point of view, like of course you always take the gig because that's what you want to do, but like you're actually like paying to do it still, even though you're getting paid to do this great gig. A lot of casual work ends up being like that as well. Like that's just the infuriating thing about our industry right now. Maybe it was always, I don't think it was always like that. I think it was better when you speak to the old guys about the 80s and 90s. I think things were better before, but usually like taking a gig means you're losing money. Anyway, I don't want to be too depressing about that. But yeah, so Continuum was all happening, but now like with Marty being away, it's all a bit on ice. We will do more again. I'm looking forward to it. We do have some things that we want to get done. Like I don't know if you remember Marty's Betty Boop movie.
Yep.
Like we want to do that again, and I want to do my Charlie Chaplin thing with Continuum again. Like so we have things we want to do, but it's just a matter of getting all the ducks to line up. But they will line up. We will make it happen somehow.
Yeah. I mean,
So-
you got to get that
somehow.
Queensland border open first to get Marty over the
first-
border, but
Exactly. So this year I haven't thought about, I missed Continuum, but I haven't really thought about it that much this year because like there's almost no point. Like we can't really do anything right now. So we just watch this space, and hopefully something comes good soon and we can play it together soon, because it's amazing to play in quartets. Like it's, well, you know, you do it every week, right?
yeah,
So,
it's probably one of the best things I do, and
Yeah.
I really look forward to it every week. Even if I'm dead tired, you know, I just sort of, I'm just one of those things I just, absolutely love doing, and highly recommend everyone, have a quartet at some stage.
Get one with your neighbor, with your dog.
No, just up to you.
Yeah. Like,
Now we talked about all these amazing things you've been involved in and are involved in, and experiences and gigs and stuff. Here's a bit of a tough one. Out of all of these amazing things you've done, is there one standout performance that sticks with you, and why?
oh man, they're different because different gigs feel really different depending whether it's a small chamber thing or like a bigger thing.
Yeah.
It's hard to top like a gig like that Symphony in the Domain, even though it was like a rainy, stormy afternoon, and like but just getting to get up there and do the Cyberbird, in the Domain with the SSO. That's
home
very
crowd.
hard.
Yeah.
That's a very hard gig to top. As with the Australian World Orchestra, it's very hard to top that gig. I'm seeing Niels's face. I remember doing in the Zoom thing. I remember doing the full baritones gig in Scotland. No, was that Scotland? Yeah, that was an incredible gig as well, playing with Arno Bornkamp and Niels and Simon Brew. There's been a few like that are incredibly like really musically satisfying. So yeah. Oh, what else? Yeah, I think it's compared to like the most memorable one, just because it was so like hyper real, was the Domain one. But like even those 3 gigs are the ones that like I think about them a lot still now. That I don't know if Niels remembers that full baritones gig, but that was just like really again, it was like when the music is alive and like you can almost see it and feel it. So with the Australian World Orchestra was like that. Playing with Niels and Arno and Simon Brew was like that. The music it had motion to it. So like those kind of, there's a few of them.
Yeah. No, I remember seeing
hope
that
there are more.
with you, Niels, and it was like, I was very lucky because it was like packed at
Yeah.
Congress, and it was
And all these like Londex is sitting in the bloody front row, and like Brantford is out the back. This is surreal, that kind of stuff. So every now and then one of those ones happens, and it reminds you of like why you get so excited about playing music. Do you know what I mean? Like, because when you're like staring at the teaching, and when you're like at those rehearsals not going well or trying to find a good read, you're like, oh my god, what am I doing? But then you have an experience like that, and you're like, oh my god, this is why. Like, you get that same feeling that I used to get like having a jam with my old teacher, like I was talking about way back. That like, this is just so fun. This is why I do what I do. So there's a couple of them, and hopefully there's more soon, but maybe not this year. Actually, well, I have one gig coming up this year I'm looking forward to, because it's such a rarity. I'm doing a Music Viva gig in Wagga Wagga with Murillo.
Yeah, I saw the ad for that.
I think it's going to be one of those gigs because like it's the only one. I haven't done a gig since the bloody... Oh, no, we did Sax Summit.
No, we did a gig.
So we did Sax Summit, and then before Sax Summit, in terms of live gigs to people, it was the Diamond Princess gig. So like in January.
Yeah.
So
I'll get to that one, because
I know you'll get to that. But so like I feel like this gig in Wagga, which is like usually I do a couple of Murillo. We've been playing this repertoire for a long time. Usually we do a few of these gigs a year or whatever. This is the one. I think it'll be one of those ones too. Really cool. Like memorable.
Yeah, and I think particularly a lot of people be in the same boat. Like after so long. Just getting the opportunity to play with people. Like I know with Nexus, the first gig that we did after things shut down, it was amazing to just be able to play together again. So now we'll talk about sort of some of the things you're working on now. Now we mentioned at the start you're currently as they call it, a knee doctor, is like NEE, as in almost a doctor, because you're doing your doctorate at the Sydney Conservatorium. And your research is it's a composer-performer topic. Can you tell us a little bit about exactly what it is you're currently researching?
I can try. It's like I've got to really plunge my head into it now, because now this week I finished like the last composition I think I'll do, and now I've just got to do the writing stuff. It's really about creativity. It's really, and I'm becoming increasingly interested in this, maybe because I'm not doing much performing, much music. So really, I guess at the nub of it is like, after years and years of playing the saxophone, how do I jump on the saxophone, or like how do I create something new with the saxophone? It's like the old battle between like your knowledge and your creative instincts. Like often our habits and our training are barriers to the creative process, right? So how do you like take your habits and your training, but fight through those barriers to creativity and find something new? So it's really a study in creativity, and I'm kind of growing increasingly interested in that, actually, about the creative process. If you think about it, we as humans know so little about the creative process. We just think it's just like fuzzily spark that comes from some fairy, and it's like creativity is like that process of thinking of something new. The creative process is like the most it's what makes us different to the monkeys, right? Like it's the most important thing we do as a human species. Like it's why we build skyscrapers, but the monkeys have stayed in trees for all these years, right? But we know nothing about it. Like we don't really understand it at all. So I've been trying to like look at my own practice and try to understand it better. And I could really see myself getting more into it. And certainly over the next 9 months, I will be getting more and more into it. But that's the general idea. How does my training and knowledge of the saxophone, how does that inhibit my creative process, and how do I, more importantly, get past those inhibitions? You know what it's like. You jump on your saxophone, right, and you always play the same things, don't you? When you do a solo, you always play the same things, right? Because that's what you've been practicing, and that's the way we work. So how do you get past that, like, effectively, and how useful is that, and how do you better negotiate that? That's what I'm trying to grapple with. I don't think I'll be able to answer it, of course, but like I'll give it a go, you know.
Well, well, you know, you got to dream big, you know. Any conclusions to date, or still?
Not at all. So I've just been like writing a lot and keeping a lot of notes, and like there's a few really important things that I think you do. You need to, like, it's all about setting. What really helps you really is setting very strict parameters and guidelines. So I've written little pieces where, like, I'll only be allowed to use like one certain note on the saxophone, and try to see, like, almost like divergent thinking exercise tasks. So experiments where I just try. So how many ways can you play the note B flat? Do you know what I mean? And what can I then do with those? So I've got pages of different ways that I tried to play the note B flat. And what you find from there is that, like, there's like within those pages of me brainstorming the note B flat, there are like 15 compositions if I want them. Do you know what I mean? So it's how do you, like, and of course when you jump on your saxophone and play B flat, the first three come to mind. But if you actually sit there and keep thinking about different ways to make a B flat on your saxophone, it's crazy the stuff you come up with. Like, and that's what the whole process is about, like trying to, like, so that's probably the main thing that has been doing it for me, setting yourself these very small, like almost divergent thinking tasks, or limited, like setting your parameters really, really tight. And then making yourself think really hard about what you're going to do. And it's crazy the stuff you come up with. And you're using the knowledge that you have, but you have to reinvent that knowledge almost. Yeah. So I know I need to think more about it and work on it heaps more, but that's kind of what's been going on.
Okay. So it sort of sounds very similar to, say, someone starting off improvising. You give them like a very limited amount of material to start improvising on, and then, exploring the possibilities with that. So it sounds definitely very similar. Would you say that this process of, say, giving yourself, a set amount of parameters and then sort of exploring what's possible with that, is that your compositional process per se, or is it a little bit different?
I've been at least trying to incorporate, that's just one of the things I've been doing, just been at least trying to incorporate that into certain parts of, like, the saxophone things. And just taking, like, the initial sparks from there. But I've done all sorts. I had like a pattern detection software system set up where I was like, I have a database of all, like, the saxophone repertoire that I play, and I was like cross-checking my musical ideas against this database to make sure my musical motifs weren't actually just coming from the sax repertoire. So I was doing that and composing using that database for a while. That is something I need to revisit. And then even, like, writing a lot for the saxophone but away from the saxophone, or writing for other, like, so I wrote a duet for violin and saxophone earlier this year, but I basically wrote like a complete violin part first, a really idiomatic violin, which was really great for me, like lots of double stops and harmony. I learned a lot about the violin, and then engineered the saxophone part around the violin part. So I had to think about how can I use my saxophone part to actually to work with the idiosyncrasies of the violin. So it was like putting the wagon the other way around. Like, I've been setting myself these stupid little experiments like that for the past few years. And now I need to kind of, like, find out what it all means, I think. And then, So I've done the fun stuff and come up and, like, had, like, lots of sessions just trying to do as weird as stuff I can think of. And now I'm going to have to, like, try to piece it, and taking, like, notes and recording and then I'm going to piece it all together. And in the process of that, what I really wanted to do was to get better at composing, which I've spent a lot of time composing in this past couple of years, And so I actually kind of went into the course, like, thinking of, like, the doctoral part of it just, like, as a way to study composition, and in a way it has been. But now that I'm getting to this back end of it, I'm like, this researchy stuff is actually really interesting, and I could probably, like, come up with some really interesting thing here. Like, I was just gonna, like, eat the thesis, don't tell Sydney Uni, I'm like, yeah, I'll do the thesis, but whatever, I really want to learn how to compose, and I want to have sessions with Paul Stanhope. That was kind of my logic going into it, which is not what you're supposed to do. But now that I'm kind of coming out of it, I'm like, yes, it's been great, I've learned so much about composing, but this research stuff is amazing. So I've kind of being, like, dragged into that researchy headspace a lot more, because it is amazing, like, just how little we know about it, and how hard it is to describe the way you come up with something, and the so many influences and factors on any given idea that you create. It's amazing. So okay. That's where that's at. It's a total mess, but it's a mess, like, right now in my head and on my hard drive, and I have about 9 months to, like, undo this mess. And
look, it's always, in the middle of it's always the worst of it, but there's an end in sight.
Oh yeah. COVID's been good for that.
Yep.
Like, making me do this doctorate, because, like, for a long while I was just doing the stuff I want to do, the playing and the writing, and now I'm having to, like, do the other stuff. That's cool. Yeah.
So from the research you've done so far, say, like, for saxophone players out there who may be interested in, delving into the world of composition.
Yeah.
In terms of the things that you found so far, or from your own experiences, what suggestions would you give to people sort of looking to make a start and delving into the world of composition?
That is so hard. Just start and just try to finish at least one thing.
Okay.
Because like there are so many like little sketches, and I'm getting better at it now. Like it's so easy to write the first 4 bars, right? And it's what you do next. So like if you get your 4 bars which you have written and you don't know what to do with it, which is the common thing to do, well, there's a bunch of things you do, but just like study other pieces that you really like and copy them, but using your 4 bars, if you know what I mean. Like copy their structure. Like I think if you've got your favorite 4 bars and then you have a structure, then you can make it flow from there. But sing, really. So if you've got like your 4 bars that you really like and you want to turn that into a whole like 2 to 3 minute piece, just trust your instincts, sing it, and you'll find it. That, and then I don't know, different people work differently, but I write and rewrite and revise, and I know Niels will know this because like I've written a piece for him, even the one this year, and then I rewrote it, and then he sent it back, and then I rewrote it again, and I'm sure next time I go and I look at that pandemic piece, I'll probably make changes again. So it's like this constantly evolving thing. But just start and then try to get yourself to an ending. Start it and get an ending. Like even if it's a 30-second piece, but then at least you might have a framework in mind, and then you can stretch that 30 seconds out. And it's like everything. The more you do, the better you get. You get more experienced. So just do it a little bit every day, just like playing your scales.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's probably my advice. But I've found it really hard and like really time consuming, but extremely satisfying. But time consuming is the big one. Like,
yeah. Well, a lot of us only have all the time in the world at the moment, so maybe a good time to get into it.
Yeah, definitely, because I find it really tough, because I find like with composing, in the way like I could pick up a saxophone and play for a few hours and be productive, but with the composing, like I get an hour, and then after an hour I just start to just go mad, and the music gets just weirder and crapper and crapper. So I usually do an hour and then I have to stop, because otherwise I'll start like deleting stuff that was really good and start like it just starts to like become a hazy mess. Right. So, but maybe other people probably aren't like that. That's just me. So it starts off in my first hour, I get like really good work done, and then I tend to undo it and just like throw out rubbish in the next hour. So I always have to do an hour and then have a break, and then do another hour and have a break. So it's really time consuming in that sense too. Okay. Yeah. So that's my tips.
Nice. All right, so I've got a bit of a deep one for you.
No.
It's what we do. Now, the saxophone, as we said earlier, like, there's, it's, you kind of have to make your own opportunities out there in terms of, creating performance opportunities or collaborations and things. And like yourself, there's a few people turning to being composer-performers, and, plethora of other things as well. How do you think the saxophone scene here in Sydney is going to sort of, from what you've seen over the last 10 years, I don't want to give away your age, but you've been around for a while, you've seen how it's been in the last 10 years and sort of where it is now. How do you sort of see it sort of evolve, like saxophone players evolving here in Sydney in the next 10 years? Do you feel like they're going to be a lot more versatile in terms of what they do, or do you think, I don't know, what do you think?
It's a hard one, especially right now, because like no one knows anything, and like right now things just seem so bleak. It's like, actually Sydney was already a really tough town, I think, in terms of getting stuff. Maybe like we just feel sorry for ourselves and we're victims, but I think Sydney was already a pretty tough town, just in terms of like getting an interest and getting a bloody venue that didn't want to take $2,000 off you to put on like a concert with 30 people. Sydney was already a really tough, and I think right now it's getting tougher. I just think, I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball. I just think saxophone players need to just think about what they are producing and just be 100% committed to producing excellent things, whatever that may be, whether that means you're like going to play in a quartet, or you're going to like write jingles, or you're going to, I think you need a big broad skill set. From like, it's not enough just to play saxophone, I think. Like you want to play saxophone, but you probably need to know how to teach a bit as well. And you certainly want to know how to like go out and find gigs, and you want to know, I think the more skills you have, the better. And they will kind of help you with your saxophone stuff as well. but I think you have to be able to make like some kind of product to try to get out there. And it's harder, I think, because there are less ways to create that product in the way that even Jim was talking about this. There used to be grants for you to try out new stuff, and there used to be venues that you could book for cheap for trying out new stuff. And that stuff is pretty bleak right now in terms of like, so I got that dome bar for free. When I did that very first gig with Marilla, I got that dome bar for free to put that gig on. And I sold tickets at the door, and we both made money that night on a gig. I think now if I try to book that dome bar, they'd probably want $2,000. In which case I couldn't do it because I only sold like 40 tickets, if that.
Yeah.
So that's what's really hard right now. But we have this online thing. So there's a great space here online, and there are great festivals of these popping up online. Hard part again is monetizing it, but like there's a lot of smart people out there, and there are, I guess, ways. But you've got to have something to put up and to put out. So and there's a lot of skills, not just saxophone skills, but a lot of like creative skills, but also like administrative skills.
Yeah,
Better word in terms of doing that. Yeah, I think that's at least in Sydney, or at least like my understanding of the scene is like it's what are you bringing to the scene? What can you bring to the scene? Because there's like you need to bring the water to the well, because if you go to the well is dry.
Yeah.
Like, it's really depressing. But you know what I mean? So, but if you can come with something to put into the well, then maybe like you can help other people, and then the other people are there also bringing their products to the well.
Wow.
Really
Yeah, that's deep, man.
You said deep, right? Water.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? But if like, so even like with the Nexus thing, you guys, you bring your thing into the scene, and that creates something, and then I try to bring my thing, and that creates something, and we're not really competing. We're both just trying to build our things, and
Yeah.
in some way we can help each other. But you have to have something to bring to the party, because the party, unless people bring the music to the party, it's like a COVID party. It's bloody lame. So that's the hard part. It's how you get your baby to see the light of day. That's the hard part. But you have the internet now, and you have, think outside the square as well. So that's, I don't know where we go from here. It looks like, I think it has been getting tougher, and the COVID just made it really tough. But maybe we get a spring back the other way now too. Or maybe
well, I mean, you think about it, like you look at, the Dark Ages and stuff, there was pretty dark time, and then, eventually came out of that, and there was like a renaissance per se. So
you just hang out another couple of decades.
Well,
you're right. Like things do swing back around. I like weep for live music in Sydney, like, and it just has created a culture in the Sydney where no one knows or appreciates or understands not just music, not just classical music, just instrumental music, like
but in that same
live music, it's like there's people, they don't even, it's not even on their radar. They don't even know it exists. I feel like the people.
Yeah. But I think also in that same token, I think there's a few people out there who have taken it for granted, and after months and months not actually being able to go to a gig, I think there's a lot of people calling out to see
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it'll swing back, and if we could be there with like our shiny products ready and waiting, like what we do is always going to be like a sort of niche-ish. Like we're not trying to be pop stars. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm not trying to be a pop star. But I want to at least like be able to be successful enough to continue making things. Do you know what I mean? And like that's like that itself is a hard one. But like right now, or like maybe I've finally reached that total selfish artist phase where I'm like, well, like whatever happens, it doesn't really matter, because I want to write this piece because I want to like write this piece, and it's for me. And do you know what I mean? Like, and like no one else on the planet will like it. That's like finally that's kind of becoming okay with me. Like, I used to like want to always do things that like, I was going to get a big clap for, and I still do. And I'm sure when I go out and play, I'll want to like finish the gig with an altissimo note so I get a big clap, that kind of thing. But there's now an increasingly bigger part of me that's like it doesn't matter. Like I need to do this for me. This is my art. And like, you know what, you don't like it, that's fine, get your own art. This is mine.
No, that's an important thing. I think like, whatever you do, you got to have some passion and drive behind what you do. You don't just do it because you feel like you have to. Like there's got to be some love for the project that you're working on, and obviously with you it's everything you do, you invest so much into it, and you can see that. But the end result is fantastic because of that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just have to. It's like there's no half measures. Also, I feel like a lot of this industry is like a bit of a war of attrition. Like the people that are still around are just the people that have stuck it out and like rolled with the punches and taken their hits. And it's really depressing, aren't I? You know what I mean? Like, but that's a big part of
Yeah.
it. Like that's just being able to like get all those rejections and just and just be like, oh, you know what, whatever. Like, I still want to do this. That's
Yeah.
part of it too. Yeah.
Now, speaking of the younger generation, hopefully we haven't put too many people off with that conversation. But
Sorry.
no, it's all good. That's what we want, honesty and all that.
Yeah.
But you're also a prolific educator as well. You teach at
Right.
many prestigious schools here, and some bits and pieces, and a clinician. You get around, touring here, there, and everywhere, doing workshops and various conservatoriums and all that jazz. Your experiences, like you've had like such a vast array of different experiences, and you've learnt so much. In terms of your sort of teaching approach and philosophy, like could you talk us through about how do you approach teaching? Like what's your philosophy on what you want students to learn and come out of lessons with you?
I think, yeah, a lot of this. I think Mark was talking about this too. Mark Walter, when I listened to your interview with him, it's all about what does this student need today. You know what I mean? Like it's all about that half an hour in the student's week. It doesn't matter that student might be my 12th student of the day and my 16th student of that week, and I'm tired and I'm hungry and I didn't sleep last night because my daughter woke me up. That kind of, it doesn't matter. It's about the half hour. That's that kid's half hour, and what I could do in that half an hour to encourage them to have a passion of music that's somewhere near mine. Like I don't expect that they'll love it as much as me, because like we're weird. Nathan,
Yeah.
we're weird. What we do is weird. But to at least have a glimmer of like my passion, because music has given me so much, and like for them to have a small, like a tenth of like the joy. If you could give them the tenth of that joy, then that's a good job well done. So it's about what do I have to do in this half hour this week with this kid, or hour depending on what it is, to try to get that out of this kid, and that varies so much. It varies on the personality of the kid, on the skill level of the kid, on like the kids, like is it before lunch or after lunch because the kid's hungry. So that's actually how I now survive teaching. It becomes a lot more interesting for me in that way as well, because teaching is like, it's like you're a therapist sometimes, like just trying to like actually think, what's going on here and how can I really help make this kid more musical. Yeah, so I think that's what it is for me. It's like what can I do, and they vary sometimes. Like so, it's just not. I think when I was first teaching, I was like, I have to get this kid, and they got to do these scales, and they have to do this grade, and they have to do. And the more I teach, the less I think like that. There are some kids that like they're going to come in and they're going to smash through grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in a row, learn the scales, do it from memory. That works really well for some kids and they love it. But if you do that to the wrong kid, they'll quit next year, or they might not even quit. It's even worse than quitting. They'll hate it. That's even worse than quitting. Then they're there because their mum makes them there. That's the worst. And they're the most depressing, sad, awful half hours of my life when I've been there with a kid that does not want to be there. So first principle for me is like you have to make it so the kid wants to be there, that they're happy to be there, they're excited to be there. And then from there, everything else flows. So it's about like, yeah, from there, if you've got that, if they trust you, then they will like slowly but surely come around, and like you can have a good time in the lesson. So a lot of that is just like even just hanging out a bit and having a chat sometimes, if that's what it takes, especially teenage boys, and you know what I mean. And then like casually playing things, not expecting that they like, you will tell them to practice, but you don't expect it. Playing something different the next week, even though the piece they're working on sounds like absolute rubbish. We'll start something different. Let's try this jazz one. Let's try this jazz, like pop, whatever. You know what I mean? Very flexible approach, because it's also for me so that I don't go mad trying to beat my head against the wall. I think it's a big mistake to try to treat all these students as like they're me. Do you know what I mean? Like the student I was and the student you were, like who's going to come in and do what they're told and practice and care. That's a big
It's true.
mistake.
Everyone's different, so
yeah. So I think that's something I learned. That would have been good to have learned that at the con. I wouldn't have had like 10 years of teaching where I like cried and beat my head against the wall. But I've finally come to that realization. And teaching is a lot more interesting when you think about it like that. Like when you think about like it's like a detective. How do I make this work for this kid? Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts at least. Yeah.
Cool. Now, if there was one lesson or one pearl of wisdom that you wanted students to remember from lessons with you, what would it be?
Oh, oh, it's just got to be an enthusiasm for music, right? Like
Yeah,
that's it. They just got to want to get their saxophone out. If they can get their saxophone out once a week, like other than the lesson, then I'm pretty excited about that with some of the kids I teach. You know what I mean? So
mm,
yeah, that's it. And like if we could have that across society, then all of our performance work would be more. They'd be more engaged with that too. So it's just like a slither of like the passion for music that I know is possible out there that I have. Then yeah, that would be it. Yeah.
cool. All right, so we're coming to the tail end, and we're just
Ah,
gonna
I've
wrap it up soon.
got
But
Oh,
uh, the hot topic for the the last I don't know how long it's been, COVID-19.
oh,
Obviously it's affected all of us
yeah,
in some shape or form.
yeah.
And you were saying before, you felt extremely lucky to have all these opportunities, but you've also experienced the other end of the
Other end.
spectrum in terms of luck.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
unfortunately, your luck ran out at the beginning of the year where
Oh, yeah.
you got stuck on a certain cruise ship.
That was a
Um,
good shit.
can,
Yeah.
I know you did an interview. I think it was for ABC at the start of the year
ABC,
when you were on it. But can
yeah.
you tell us like how did you
Oh,
end up stuck there
oh
and
my
what
God, that was
happened?
bloody. I can even tell you why I did the interview. Anyway, so I got on. Every summer, not every summer, the last couple of summers, I've been doing these cruise gigs, like because they were glorious money, like
Mm,
really quite a lot of money, for like 2 40-minute sets of like playing fun stuff, Baker Street, like yakety sax, really fun stuff, and especially like it's like a floating artist in residency. Like I just get so much work done. So I was always on there, like writing music all day. And then when we get to port, like you'd go out and like see some amazing place. So we went all around New Zealand, and this one was around Japan and stuff. So they were really cool. And especially in January where there's not much else going on, it's a good way to make some money and to get a bucket of work done.
mm.
Like, so they're really good. Well, they were really good. Anyway, I did this once. I got on this ship on the I forget what day I got on. I blocked it all out. I think it was like Boxing Day. Yeah, it was 26th, and I did my gig that night. So I
Mm.
did my 2 40-minute sets, and then I wasn't rostered on for the rest of the cruise. So I had 7 days of sailing around Vietnam and Japan,
Sweet.
like just on a holiday. It was awesome, awesome. And then like I was gonna get off on the whatever it was, the 3rd of February, and I had a gig like in Sydney that weekend. Like I was like had plans. I was starting teaching, and then this COVID thing blew up. There was a case on board. We got put in a quarantine, a lockdown on the ship for 2 weeks. So I had to cancel all the stuff that I was going to do in those 2 weeks. But then over the course of that 2 weeks, as you know, like the quarantine was an absolute fail. And it spread. And that's when I did that ABC interview because I was worried about getting stuck on there. And it was
Mm.
a long story. Eventually, the government organized an evacuation flight. And then I did two further after that evacuation flight in the middle of the night out of Japan to Darwin. Did 2 weeks isolation then in Darwin before being allowed to come home. And then I got home and like literally 6 days later, Sydney shut down anyway because of the COVID. So I've been like on this COVID roller cycle for quite a while. Like I mean, it was so intense when that was happening, especially the Diamond Princess stuff and the Darwin stuff, because like at that point it wasn't happening to anyone else as well.
Mm.
Like in those first 5 weeks, I was like the COVID guy. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it was
you're like sort of at
yeah,
the
and
front of
then
it, and
like I
then
was actually worried. I'm like, man, what is going on? Is this like gonna trash my reputation? I've had to pull out of like a stack of gigs, and I'm like on the news being the COVID guy. When you Google me now, I'm gonna be the COVID guy. You know, like is this like how bad is this gonna go? And then in a way, like now that's happened to everyone, it's like a lot less. Like it's like whatever. It's just one story. We've all got stories now. Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
so.
yeah,
And in a lot of ways, I dodged the worst of it. Like I got a lot of work done on the Diamond Princess and in Darwin. They paid me. They paid me some compo for it as well, which
mm.
was awesome because like I couldn't work forever for that.
Yeah. Like I
And
remember
then
you were out almost all of term one for
oh yeah,
teaching.
half of term one.
Mm.
So like I got really lucky in the way that if it happened now, I wouldn't get any of that good treatment like that
Yeah.
I got from them because now they're almost expecting it. And everyone I worked for was super nice about it. All the parents, all the schools, everyone was really, really great. Everyone just felt really sorry for me. And then like then it happened here anyway, which was kind of the ultimate irony. because I mean, like the guys that got flown back now, they get to stay at the Stanford, but I nearly got sent to Christmas Island. There were like two options. There was this Darwin place or Christmas Island, and the original plan was Christmas Island. So I could have done 2 weeks of Christmas Island, you know what I mean? And then I was lucky that it went the other way. We went to Darwin instead. But like,
that would have
but I got a lot of work done, and actually, like, COVID has been good for me getting my head around this doctorate and like writing lots of music. And I've had weekends. I've had a picnic every since we were allowed to, like every Sunday with my kids, in the way that like, because I'm not doing gigs, I'm not practicing in the same way. Like I've had weekends all year. It's been kind of crazy, different life. Yeah. So there have been some good things about what it's done, but I'm terrified about what happens now and how do we in terms of get out of it? Performing arts, how do we get out of it every day? Just seeing this horrible stuff. I was reading about the AOB stuff, the AOBO stuff today in the paper, and like, man, it's we've got a time. We're in for a time of it, like, you know. But so far so good. So far I feel like I've got more out of COVID than it's got out of me in terms of like getting through that and getting a bunch of work done and keeping all my jobs at schools. In fact, I'm teaching more than ever now, but not heading on it so much because I have clearer weekends now because I'm not gigging. So like, so far so good, you know. And if we can get through this summer and everything comes out the other end, then, you know, maybe we'll have made it through and we can start trying to find a way to get though. And I'll get back to it. I'll get back to pushing the gigs again. I'm sure you will. I'm sure we all will. Like, been a big kick in the guts for us, but like, what else are we gonna do? Like, it's just what we do. So we'll eat it up and we'll suck it up, and we have to do like a bunch of, you know, terrible gigs for free, like socially distanced or whatever. We'll do it. We'll do it all again, and we'll build it up again, just like we did last time. And maybe in 10 years' time, we'll be back to where I was before. And if that's it, then so be it. Whatever. It's the journey. I don't know. Is that your take on it? I don't know. I don't know.
Me, look, I'm pretty zen about the whole thing, but I mean, it's certainly, you know, you don't let it sort of kick you over. You just got to keep, you know, going for it and trying to find opportunities and adapt, really.
And adapt. That's the other thing. Find ways to work in this space. So I've been thinking about that because eventually this doctorate will be done, and then I'm going to have to not have that to focus on. So I'm like, well, I might have to think about how I am going to, one thing at a time. But yeah, I've been thinking about that. What does it look like if I finish the doctorate and this COVID thing is still a problem, which is probably going to be the case? What does my career look like then? Like, what do I do then? Because right now I've got this big distraction, which has been great. Actually, I'm really grateful for it. But that's going to end, I hope, one day.
All right, cool. Now, tail end of the interview, so we're getting there, so that's all good. Now, just a bit of a light-hearted question. If, like, in a scenario, say, you know, you might have a bit of a break between students or something, and, you know, you have a 10-minute block, and it's the only time you have to play in that day. Yeah. You only had 10 minutes. What would you practice?
Okay. Oh, I mean, I'll usually whip up and down some scales just because, you know, like, just to wake everything up. And then if I'm actually going to play something that I want to play, there are two things that actually maybe three, because I've just recently picked up a third one. We'll call it three, that I just keep coming back to time and time again. And that's the Furling book, the Telemann Fantasies. I know Niels, if he's there, I know he plays them a lot. And now recently I've like got back to the Botzer book, you know the Botzer, and we've played them again. And I just keep going back, especially the Furling and the Telemann. Again and again and again, and playing them all and finding new things in them, and like that's probably like they're the ones that there's just so much in it, and they're so good for your playing, and so good for your, like, you know, sense of musicality and feeling like you can make some music by yourself on the saxophone, I think. And getting better and keeping the house in order in terms of chops too. So they're the big ones, other than just like scales and long tones, which often is the case. But usually I don't have the discipline. Like, depends. But if it's only 10 minutes and I just want to play something, it's probably going to be either Furling or Telemann. All right, cool. Be geeky.
All right, Nick Russoniello, thanks so much for, you know, taking some time out of your busy schedule. Well,
right.
I mean, no pun intended there, but there is no pun.
No, thanks for having me. When are you being interviewed?
I got nothing really to say. Really, I enjoy being on this side of the.
Start a petition.
Off you go. But no, that's all right. But look, thanks so much for taking some time out. Some really insightful things there, and it's really good to actually like I know I've known you for a long time, but actually, get to sit down and actually ask him some stuff. And, I learnt a lot tonight, and, hopefully a few people who joined us this evening as well. So again, thank you very much. In terms of, what's coming up, obviously, it's sort of, as you say, it's very hard to tell what's next because, it's, who knows what's going to happen. But in terms of, upcoming projects and, upcoming concerts and things, what's a good way to sort of get in the loop with what you're up to and what's happening?
Yeah, there's some things I'm trying to churn out later this year. Like I've got this Golden Age album. We're going to get it out this year somehow. And I'm also I wrote this chamber music work, which I'm playing now with Ensemble Offspring. We're going to film it and stuff next month, which is going to be awesome. So other than like, you just get the Facebook page like that, and or head to my website and get the mailing list thing going on the website. They're the easiest ways, so I can spam you and let you know when that's all happening. Yeah.
All right, not
cool, man.
bad.
Well,
bad
good
one.
chat, Henshaw. I'll see you soon.
Thanks for that.
Summer gig soon.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely look at doing one in the near future, I'm sure.
Yeah,
but again,
that gig in the Gunnedah jazz thing, the Tractor Festival.
Oh, the Tractor. Yeah, the Tractor. Yeah, if you're in Gunnedah in November, I believe Nick and I will be paying a visit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
November, one gig in November.
Yeah, keep an eye out for us there. Anyway, thanks again so much for your time, Nick. As I said, it's amazing. Always great fun having a chat as well. So good to catch up. Actually, felt like I haven't actually seen you in quite a while, but yeah.
It's been a while.
Okay, and thanks everyone for joining us this evening as well. No worries. Next week we have. I believe we might have a special guest from the other side of the planet, I believe, and the other hemisphere for a special edition. The following week we'll have another guest from north of the border in Queensland, where we'll be featuring Dr. Diane Tolmie, who is the saxophone professor at the Queensland Conservatorium. And we've also got a few other special guests next month, including jazz saxophonist Paul Cutland, who's an amazing composer and improviser. Loretta Palmero, who I've been dying to get on here for ages, and she's finally agreed to it. And of course, someone that Nick and I both admire is Marjorie Smith, who is a clarinetist and saxophonist that we both admire. But anyway, keep tuning in, and if you enjoy more of these, we have a YouTube channel. If you're watching this, you're probably on the channel, so there you go. But anyway, have a good night, stay safe, remember to wash your hands, and until next time, see you later.
Night.
Night.